Finding Messiaen's Blackbird, an investigative analysis of birdsong and other techniques used in Le Merle. Religion, love, and the importance of nature, especially birds, were driving forces behind Olivier Messiaen's life and in his compositions. These three topics shaped and molded Messiaen's studies in rhythm and influenced all his musical pursuits. Le Merle Noir serves as a pivotal composition in Messiaen's works. Many of the compositional techniques that he developed over his lifetime can be found in this piece. In it, he uses serialism, ancient Greek rhythms, Hindu deshitalas, and birdsong. Pierre Messiaen and Cécile Sauvage welcomed the arrival of Olivier Messiaen on December 10, 1908 in Avignon, France. When World War I began to take foot, his father was called into the service of the French military and his mother took refuge in Grenoble. There, Messiaen was surrounded by nature. He taught himself how to play the piano there and began to immerse himself in poetry and fairy tales. After returning from the war, Messiaen's father accepted a job in Nantes. After only 6 months, the family moved again, to Paris. It was then, in 1919, at the age of 11, that Messiaen began his studies at the Paris Conservatory. During his studies at the conservatory, he was introduced to plain chant in Greek meters. The meters of ancient Greece fascinated Messiaen. He immersed himself in this ancient realm of rhythm, and during his investigations of these rhythms, he discovered an ancient 13th century text from India, the Samgita Ratnakara, or the Ocean of Music, written by Sharnagadeva, a 13th century musicologist. In the 5th chapter of this book, Messiaen learned of the 120 different deshitalas, a system of rhythms that were developed and used in India and influenced both Hindustani and Carnatic music. Messiaen referred to these deshitalas as ancient Hindu rhythms. These rhythms, as Messiaen discovered, shared and overlapped rhythmic patterns with the ancient Greek rhythms. Although these two ancient texts come from different parts of the world and were written under different circumstances and in different time periods, they nevertheless feature some similarities in organization. These rhythmic systems entranced Messiaen and influenced many of his works. He describes them in detail in his 7-volume, 8-book treatise. In my research, I have uncovered several deshitalas and Greek rhythms embedded within Le Merle Noir, specifically measures 9 through 35. Each of the deshitalas has a distinct feel and are often associated with the gaits of different animals. These meanings attributed to each of these rhythms can provide the performer with contextualization and insight into the possibilities of musical expression. The first example we will look at is located in measures 23 and 24. It is a duplicated pattern of 1/16th note followed by an 8th note. This rhythm can be attributed to a Greek rhythm called the iamb. Messiaen notes in his treatise that this same rhythm through diminution can also be attributed to the deshitala known as the rati. Though they are from different times and places, the two rhythms are ultimately the same. The Greek rhythm iamb is said to represent the sound of a heartbeat. And the rati is representative of love. This knowledge changes the way we think about and interpret this portion of the piece. Many of the Hindu rhythms are associated with the gaits of different animals. It is with this in mind that we will next look at measures 15 and 16. The first 5 notes in this phrase form a group consisting of an 8th note, a 16th note, followed by 3 more 8th notes. This specific grouping can be attributed to the deshitala called the simha, or the lion. The following 4 notes can also be attributed to a deshitala. 3 eighth notes followed by a dotted eighth note is called the gajalila, which has been translated to mean the game of the elephant. The elephant is an important symbol in India. As the representation of one of the Hindu gods, Ganesha is an elephant. In Messiaen's own words, the gajalila, with its last value being too long, reproduces the heavy gait of the elephant. He also suggested that it perhaps represented enlightenment. This knowledge provides another facet to consider when making interpretive decisions. The visualization of a lion, an elephant, and enlightenment changes our perception of how the music should sound. Messiaen's wife, Yvonne Loriot, once recalled a memory where during her preparations of one of Messiaen's compositions, she performed it for Messiaen. After hearing it, he responded, "There are no mistakes, but that's nothing like it. You haven't got the timbre of the birds." Determined to capture the timbre of the birds, she woke up very early one morning and ventured out into the countryside, sat down, and began to listen to the birds. It worked. When she performed the piece again, Messiaen was convinced, saying it was much more authentic. For a flutist to truly capture Messiaen's Blackbird, they must first find and familiarize themselves with the specific Blackbird Messiaen had in mind. The title of the piece gives us our first clue, the Merle Noir, or the Blackbird. However, Messiaen does not give us the Latin name of his bird, a feature that he includes only in his later works. There are many blackbirds found throughout the world, so one might wonder, how do we find and know the correct bird? Messiaen had only one blackbird in mind. In his words, the first bird everyone knows, the blackbird, the famous blackbird with a yellow beak, encountered not only in the countryside but today also in our cities and parks. The blackbird with a yellow beak that Messiaen describes is the Eurasian blackbird, Turdus merula. Through my research, I was able to find striking similarities between the bird vocalizations and Messiaen's writing. I created and used spectrograms of bird calls that I found so that I could visually and aurally compare my findings. I have selected several examples to showcase in this presentation. The first example is in measure 3. I found 2 different birds that shared aural similarities with written music. The spectrograms confirm these findings. Let's first take a closer look at the spectrogram. The sound that reveals the fundamental appears in orange or red. The partials are indicated vertically in a color closer to teal or green. This provides us with a visual example of what the bird sounds like. If we go back to the example in measure 3, we can see that the shapes of the intervals share an overall likeness with the written example in Le Merle Noir. Here, I have enlarged and marked in red the fundamental pitches on the spectrogram so that we may better compare them. Let's also listen to what the flute sounds like. The spectrogram above the flute music is the first bird. If we take a look at the second bird, first, let's play the flute again. And now, the second bird. Now we can see and hear the similarities between Messiaen's composition and the blackbird. Here we have measure 4. This is the flute example. This is the bird. Here is measure 4 again, with an enhanced spectrogram. This is the bird. The similarities between the written music and the spectrograms of the bird vocalizations are very exciting. Here is another example from measure 4. This is the flute part. This is the bird. You may have to turn your volume up for this one. Here it is again. This is measure 5. Let's first listen to the flute. Next, the bird. Here is another example found in measure 5. Let's listen to the flute first. Now, the first bird. And the second bird. We can not only hear that the intervals are very similar, but now we can also see. One of my favorite examples is in measure 46 with the flutter tongue. Here is the flute. Bird number 1 and bird number 2. Measure 8 also includes a passage with flutter tongue. Let's first listen to the flute. The vocalization of bird 1 and bird 2. Here we have measure 47. This is the flute. This is the bird. This is an example taken from measure 52. Let's listen to the flute. Now, let's listen to a bird. And another bird. This is measure 53. Let's first listen to the bird this time. And now, the flute. The last example I'm going to share with you today is from measure 125, the concluding flourish. Here is the flute. And here is the bird. Here is the example again, but this time with an enhanced and enlarged spectrogram. Here we have the same musical example, but with a different bird. This is the flute part. And this is the bird. Here it is again, but now with an enhanced spectrogram. Here's the bird one more time. And the flute. And back to the bird one last time. These birds are truly incredible. This research has provided insightful knowledge that can be used in the interpretation of Le Merle Noir. These insights should affect musical choices as they relate to duration of sounds, phrase construction, character, and more. For example, Turdus Marula does not use vibrato in its vocalizations, but it does widely vary its quality and depth of sound using partials and harmonics. Instead of vibrato, the flutist may consider their use of tonal harmonics. Another aspect to consider is that Turdus Marula does not vary the tempo within each stated motif. Messiaen mimics the durational construction of phrases by his placement of bar lines, reflecting the phrases of the birds, which are usually between 3 and 5 seconds long. In my opinion, one of the most compelling insights is in phrase construction. The musical form rondeau, A-B, A-C, A-D, A-E, is similar in its construction to the treatment of vocalizations created by Turdus Marula, but the bird always varies A. Knowing that Turdus Marula forms its phrases this way, we must compare it to what Messiaen writes. Le Merle Noir's phrases are written with this same phrase construction and are often divided into two groups, A and B. The A section often begins focused on a particular pitch and is guided by one motif. The original version of the motif is impossible to distinguish because one can never observe when the bird has started. The A section is repeated at the beginning of every phrase with what seems to be unlimited variation. The B section of every phrase is rarely the same. It functions alone and doesn't necessarily relate to the A section. Let's listen to a longer version of the Turdus Marula.